Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
It's always good to be back, Jim. Thank you.
Stewart, some interesting articles on your website, so we'll go through some of the topics here. All of Canada suffers when no one defends the best-paying jobs. I have a feeling those best-paying jobs might be in the resource sector.
Well, it's funny. There's recently some stats that have come out looking at the top 30 paying jobs, and that doesn't include, your orthopedic surgeon or anesthesiologist or trial lawyer, someone making a ton of money as a salaried professional. We're talking about the industry jobs and roles. And this study looked at a whole long list of them. I've taken a look at it. It turns out that fully 1 dozen of those are in the fields of mining and oil and gas and pipelines and things like that. But that's not the end of it, because you take a deeper look and you realize, well, wait a minute, there's another half dozen jobs on the list that are in the supporting roles. And I mean directly supporting, not in the, wider support network, like making sure everyone's got a hot lunch. I'm talking about utilities and some of the services that make it possible to do these. And then you can even go from there. There's another 5 or 6 finance jobs. And anyone knows, if you go into any bank's website and see what they own, a lot of it is to do with mining and energy and things like that. So people in finance are very close in this country to the whole world of energy. So I would say a strong majority of our best paying jobs in Canada are based on the fossil fuel and mining industries. So they're incredibly important to how we operate as a country.
And of course we have, it seems at least 2 and probably 2.5 political parties make a living out of attacking those jobs.
Well, that's right. There seems to be this doctrine that the best paying jobs are the ones that have to be most fiercely opposed. And, I think philosophically we've really got a political problem here. I think there's actually a solution to it, because everyone knows you don't have to be lectured at by someone to say, those fossil fuels are just terrible for the environment. Well, the thing is, we're totally dependent on them. We're 80% dependent on our energy diet on fossil fuels. Even though in BC, almost 100% of the electricity we use is green electricity, and most of the world cannot say that, so we should feel really good about it. When you look at our overall use, transportation, heating buildings, manufacturing things, you've just got to have fossil fuel. There's literally no other way to do it. Although you can start to nibble at the margins, and we should be developing electric or zero emission vehicles. We should be looking at hydrogen in the economy. These are really important things to be looking at, but let's not be operating under an illusion that we can just simply flip a switch and be there. And so I think those who are more, productively engaged in pursuing change, making the world a better place, are ones that can have an honest relationship with their dependencies, instead of this sort of shaming. There's all this tax money, federal tax money now going into a project at the University of Victoria designed to call out people who dare to work for fossil fuel companies. Well, they're talking about the most valuable jobs in the country. And we've got some left-wing wingnut professor from the sociology department at University of Victoria who's part of this multi-million-dollar project, mostly public funds, to attack the people who power society. Living in Victoria as I do, I'm, actually revolted by this idea that there is no space for a productive, respectful, conciliatory discussion on this. You know, when I went to university, I came away from my experiences thinking that you could hash it out with people, even ones you didn't agree with. But nowadays, it seems like the institutions are being fed and funded for the purpose of creating social conflict. And I think the leadership of universities really has to give its head a shake.
Well, what about our political leadership giving them the money in the first place?
Oh, well, yeah. And, you know, fortunately, in our democratic system, we can make a difference, which is why every vote counts. And I'm certainly not out in this election season to advocate for any particular party or candidate. I think everyone has to be out there as a voter, talking to their local candidates, examining the platforms and understanding what people stand for. But in my opinion, if we want to have a realistic conversation that is moving in the right direction, we're missing out. We're not hearing this stuff. Because a lot of people I know, you know, I published this article last week, and a lot of people are talking about it because they realize, first of all, it's true. I got my stats from Statistics Canada. They're bona fide. And secondly, a lot of people are not aware of this. They just think, oh, we don't need those jobs in mining because, maybe you could have a spill. You don't need jobs in oil and gas because we can live out without that stuff. You know, it's not really that essential. Well, I'm sorry. In neither case can we do without the products of that. It's just impossible. So we've got to get to grips with it. And, you know, as a conservationist, as one who understands what's going on in the world, you can see the science. You also understand that we have to be realistic about how we approach the solutions.
Now, people who think that gold mining is merely to get a precious metal out of the ground that can act as money, well, I've heard about new research that's using nano gold to do all kinds of wonderful things in the medical world. So to try to limit natural resource development, you never know what science is going to come up with later today or tomorrow.
Well, you mentioned mining in particular. You recently at resourceworks.com, our website, we published an article by distinguished scientist Dr. Lynn Anglin, who did a lot of work on the Mount Polley mine tailings spill. 5 years ago in August, it took place in central BC. And Dr. Anglin has spent, now that she's now retired, but she spent several of those years working for Imperial Metals that owns the mine where they had this problem on repairing what happened there. And the results are in. I mean, this company spent $70 million. They brought the creek where they had this spill tear away the trees and land and stuff. They've had it remediated. They've pioneered some techniques. They worked with First Nations. They've exceeded standards set down by government that they have to meet in order to show the cleanup. And by all accounts, it's a success. Meanwhile, you've got some of the anti-mining people who are often the same people who are demanding there be more copper-based electric vehicles that have to be, you know, powered from mined products, who are screaming for criminal charges in Mount Polley. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. And the misinformation out there, I'll tell you, setting the record straight on this is almost a full-time job, just this one thing alone. But the fact is, when you have people who are trained, who, in Canada's case, often the leading experts internationally, because mining is one of those industries, one of those few industries where Canada's at the very top 2 or 3 in the world in terms of mining technology and capital, or even the top 1 in the world. And I'm talking about competing with the U.S., with Australia, with Russia, in terms of, and some European countries, in terms of being a leader. And we are it. That's the one thing. I mean, we should be flagging mining. And oil and gas is considered a mining type of field by the stats people as our proudest accomplishment as a country. The fact that we have, with such a small population, been able to fashion a life of such prosperity and great quality of life for such a long time. And yet, you know, we often hear it assaulted. So something to think about.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, the federal government has put in essentially a ban on tankers in northwestern BC waters. What has that effectively done?
Yeah, this tanker ban is Bill C-48, which I've seen some polling on it. No one's really happy with it. It's not very strongly supported, but the federal government said let's ban all oil tankers and the movement of what they call persistent oil. So that's oil that would be persistent in staying in the environment if it was spilled. So that means crude oil. Let's ban it from northwest BC. Not ban it from St. Lawrence River, where there's a lot of traffic. Not ban it from the Bay of Fundy. Not ban it from around Newfoundland, where all of these very sensitive ecosystems are. Let's just ban it in one place, because we think you can't do safe tanker shipping in that one place. Everywhere else, no problem. So they passed this law, and the idea is they're wanting to protect the environment. What's happening though is actually since it was passed a couple of months ago, we're seeing some real benefit from that law. The benefit is coming to Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iran, and Alaska. So why are they benefiting? So by basically sterilizing, that's an economist term, the northwest coast of BC for crude oil shipping forever. Well, there's a 5-year window where they might look at it again in 5 years, but once these things are established, they're almost impossible to get rid of. They have enabled Venezuela to continue shipping its heavy oil to China, to India, to Singapore. You have Iran, which is now using all sorts of dodgy maneuvers to get its medium and heavy oil to China, where it's needed. And you've been seeing in the news, I mean, this is geopolitical conflict based on the crude oil trade that's coming from Iran's ability to re-enter the global marketplace. More recently, Alaska is now talking about an Alberta to Alaska railroad. I met one of the proponents of that enterprise. It's a $17 billion project to build that rail line, connect up with an existing rail line in Alaska, and thereby be able to ship oil sands crude from the oil sands of Alberta out to Valdez, Alaska, which is their big oil port, and thereby get that Canadian oil to markets in Asia. And I was present at a presentation by the group. I think they're great. I love the idea, actually. It's a very practical thing. It could be a real benefit to lots of people. But I asked the proponent, what about Bill C-48? Well, they think Bill C-48 is the factor that's allowed them to move ahead to the next stage of their project. They're out there talking about it a lot. I think they're a long way from building it, but it could happen. So I've given you 3 examples, looking around the world, of places that are benefiting because Canada is exiting from the northwest of BC as a tanker port. Because what it means is that we won't be building pipelines across the north of BC. We won't be getting Alberta oil to the places in Asia that need it the most and are willing to pay the most for it, not by the easy method. Now, I think it's great that the federal government is committed to the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. That's good. But we have no progress on the other pipelines that would also alleviate the bottleneck. Had we been able to proceed with the northern route, those in Alaska, in Iran, in Venezuela, would be not as able to pursue agendas that will enrich them. And, good on them for doing what they can do, but it's really at our expense. And I think this is something that we need to recognize, because consequences of these actions have meaning for the jobs. We've been talking about the high-paying jobs from oil and gas. Well, we lose those jobs when we can't get the goods to market. That's the problem.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, does Canada have an over-dependence on foreign oil and gas when we have lots right at home?
Well, we have plenty. We have one of the top reserves of oil and of natural gas in the world, in the top 5 in both cases. So you might think that such a country would be providing for itself using those resources, but in Canada's case, that's not true. Now, in Saudi Arabia, I think the going rate for a liter of gas is about 2 bits. It's down to under $1 in Edmonton, where it's close to the oil sands, but of course, very different story on the coast. Now, we have all of this supply, and we can't get it to foreign markets, but isn't it amazing? I was just looking at some Stats Canada data on our fuel imports, our fossil fuel imports. So all of the crude oil that we import, and also the other products that are used for combustion. I looked at other petroleum products that aren't used for combustion, for fuels, so I wouldn't call those true fossil fuels, although they are extracted from the ground, from, fossil deposits. But I'm excluding those. And what I found is that last year, in 2018, Canada imported $34 billion worth of fossil fuels. Now, that's a pretty big number. It's kind of hard to get your head around. How about this? Let's break it down, Jim, a little bit further for you. That breaks down to $4 million an hour that we're importing products that we already have ourselves, but for different reasons, such as not being able to have pipeline capacity from one end of the country to the other, we're relying on others to bring it to us. Of that 34 billion, 20 billion is crude oil. So we're importing a ton of crude oil. Probably more than 60% of it comes from the United States because it's easy. We have pipelines, comes up. There could be some anomalies in that data where oil is maybe shipped across a border and then back again, sort of like in the auto industry, but I don't think there's too much of that. So with these big numbers, and I've been writing about this, I think people are kind of astonished when they learn how big it is. Because here's the thing, Jim. We see our made in Canada fossil fuel products under sustained attack. We have politicians decrying those provinces and those people who are in these occupations that are, by the way, the ones that pay the most and produce the greatest benefits for our quality of life. We see them assaulted while these imported fuels and products are not seeing the same barriers that our own products face. In some cases, yes, but in most cases, it's completely bypassing our environmental control systems. Some of the fiscal regimes don't apply to it. I think there's some good work being done with the clean fuel standard the feds are developing. They are going to apply it to imported fuels. So I think in terms of having a level playing field, that's a good policy. I'm not just saying, they're a bunch of dummies. There's a lot of smart people working in the policy on this side. But still, it does discriminate, I'm convinced, against Canadian products, which is what torques the irritation that you might have at the existence of this import level to something beyond that. I think people are kind of ticked off that, the vast majority of our fossil fuel imports fail to meet the same environmental, social, and economic standards that Canadian energy has to.
Now, with so much money being spent on imported oil, is this all in Quebec and Eastern Canada?
Yeah, I think it's a heavier dependency there, for sure, because BC produces a lot of natural gas. We don't need to import natural gas. We might import some over the border, but I think we're pretty much self-sufficient when it comes to liquid fuels. Alberta is obviously a major supplier. I think most of the gasoline that people put in their tanks in the Lower Mainland is from Alberta. Again, you'd have a little bit of other product coming in. But it's a different story on the other side of the country. Montreal, you look at the island of Montreal, right across the river, St. Lawrence River, from a national park. There is, believe it or not, an oil port where at any given time you can see there's about 5 ships coming in from countries in Africa and the Middle East, bringing in fossil fuel products for drivers there to use. You go to St. John, beautiful Bay of Fundy. The Irving refinery on that bay is on the East Coast, the big site for imports of crude oil. They have a huge amount, billions of dollars worth of Saudi Arabian. I call it murder oil because their leadership are a bunch of murderers, are coming in. That oil, a lot of it is refined and sent to the States, so it's making money for Canada. You might say, oh, well, that's a good thing. But it's still not subject to the same environmental standards or social standards that Canadian oil is, and there's no pipeline to get Canadian oil to the Irving refinery, which is a problem. There's some challenges in technology. We produce a lot of heavy oil, not only, but the conventional oil isn't as big right now as the oil sands, and the refinery on the East Coast is not that well set up for it. But over time, they should be able to adapt their processes to the supplies and make sure that, we're matching Canadian demand to Canadian supply. You look at Ontario, I think Ontario, Quebec, in some ways they've improved a little bit in their dependencies, but at the same time, anyone would look at this, the size of the auto industry, that's a $20 billion industry. Well, we're importing that much value. This is a gargantuan amount of foreign exchange that we are letting leak out of the country, because in simplistic terms, it's when you have that foreign treasure, that foreign exchange in your kitty, that you can afford to buy things that you need, whether it's iPhones or bananas, maybe trivial, not life supporting, but also life supporting things like blood plasma and a lot of vaccines we don't produce or produce enough of in Canada. We've got to have the money to pay for it, but instead we're spending that on allowing the Saudi Arabians to buy another Lamborghini to zoom around London. Great. Who feels good about that?
Yes, it's always impressive when you're at Heathrow Airport and you see a 747 pull up and then start dropping from its belly gold-plated Rolls Royces.
Yeah, we're funding that. Doesn't it feel nice? That warm glow.
Well, I guess you just...
The maple leaf and gold-plated supercars.
Now, we also have this battle of transfer payments. Alberta and BC get nothing extra from the federal government. We contribute. Quebec cleans up big time on this. Now, where is this extra money that BC and Alberta have to fork over for Quebec's convenience come from?
Well, the equalization payments. And I got to tell you, it's such an area of fiscal detail that I don't want to weigh into it because I really am not an expert in it. But I can say this verifiable fact, which is that in Alberta, they're getting really irate about the perception that Quebec is kind of a freeloader in the sense, not that they get equalization payments per se, because in the constitutional arrangements, we have this provision. So it's what we've got. It's not that bothers Albertans I've been talking to. It's the fact that Quebecers are happy to take that money, $13 billion, I think, last year, and then complain bitterly about the existence of the Western oil and gas industry, while at the same time being some of the most enthusiastic consumers of those very same fossil fuels that they pretend to hate. You go around the Caribbean, especially in wintertime, half the accents you hear, hey, there's someone from Quebec over there. They love nothing more than flying down to Florida, Cuba, all around the Caribbean and enjoying themselves. That's great. But, to accept all this equalization, to get the benefits of transportation, to live in an economy, Quebec's economy, that's not performing very well and only has a Canadian level of quality of life because it's getting free money from the West, is just an irritant to some people in the West. Quite a few people, actually.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.